Rabbi D and Goldblatt. This is my dear friend, Pastor Steve Harms. We have, well, I should say that almost about 25 years ago, when I first started at the synagogue I'm currently at, I heard that there was an interfaith group in the area, and I showed up only to discover that it was the gathering of the Council of Churches. And almost immediately, my friend Steve began the effort to change the group from the Council of Churches to the local interfaith gathering, which and there was some measure of resistance, and there were people who left as a result. But I think the upshot was that soon, a year and a half later, there was established a local Islamic center, and the Islamic center joined, and we had people, I don't know if any of you know Amma, incredible guru from India, who she's called the hugging guru. Her centers is in our area, and they joined, and it began to grow. And it was only possible because of the vision of this man who saw right away what needed to happen, and helped grease the, help make it happen in congregating. And that was the beginning of a relationship. And I need to say that when people ask me, who is your closest rabbinic colleague? I always say, well, my closest clerical colleague is Steve. So, we've been, again, doing this work for quite some time. And we felt that Steve came to Ohala last year and had a very powerful experience. And we decided that we would, we've been through the fire together and often have experienced the fire to be, while enormously challenging, has led to a lot of creativity and growth and development and deepening of our work. So we thought we would share with you this morning some case studies of some of the challenging moments, and invite you, we're going to sort of give you some background, and then take you to the point of decision. And then invite you in smaller groups to sort of work how would you respond? How do you think you respond? We're going to challenge you in the groups to come to a decision as a group. And that should be interesting, interesting process. And then share with others what your decision was. And then we'll listen to the work you do in brief, obviously in brief periods of time. And then we will share what actually happened in our assessment and invite you to, reflect on what happened, what we did, what we feel like we would have done differently, and assess what we learned from this experience. So that's kind of the plan for the morning. A little background on who we are, general background for these folks in terms of their community. What do you think?
Yes. So, personal struggles of mine in the 80s, hanging out with folks at Zen Center in San Francisco, and trying to figure out where is this Christian theological thing going, and appreciating wisdom traditions everywhere, and learning Tai Chi.
In which case I could get
What does
this
all
will
of this
just leave
mean?
it.
And it began to coalesce in this very conservative town and setting, upscale California, the Bay Area, and how can we possibly begin to integrate some of these open-hearted, minded, creative values in ways which are going to make sense in this community? And thank God Dan showed up. Okay. Now we have another reality touchstone to work with, and it's a kind of instant partnership in terms of being with grounded people really makes a difference. And it allowed the vision inside of what had been a terribly backwards conservative zone. So that's where some of the authenticity, I think, of our struggles have got great validity, because these are not coming out of Berkeley. Yeah, which is the first thing we're often accused of, is they must be from outside the zones. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And that has created both energy between us in the partnership and the possibilities for an integrity in the community, which people never quite know what to make of, when it is multi-faith voices speaking together. That's just that I'm not religious, but why are they doing this together? That's against the rules, right? So that's huge. It's just a huge foundation.
Yeah. And we, just in terms of some background context, we live in the most well-churched place I've ever been in my life. So within, in our little local community, there are 2 Catholic churches. One has 5,000 families, one has 3,500 families. The largest church is a Presbyterian church, an evangelical church, that actually left the presbytery because the presbytery was way too liberal for them. They have 7,800 families. They have their own social service system, summer camps, counseling. They're like a little city unto themselves. We have 2 Mormon stakes, LDS churches, that are quite large. I mean, if you don't belong to a church, synagogue, mosque in our area, you are in a radical minority. So it's, as Steve said, very affluent area. In 1997, it's called the San Ramon Valley. It's about, it's in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. It's about 25 minutes southeast of Berkeley, but might as well be in another planetary system. There, in 1997, the whole area was shaken because we elected our first Democratic representative in history, a woman named Ellen Tauscher, who was about as conservative a Democrat as you could possibly get. Politics in our area were dominated by the evangelical churches, the Catholic churches, and the LDS church. So I do want to say, just shortly after I arrived, we didn't have a building. In fact, we were leasing one of the Lutheran churches, 2 Lutheran churches, smaller Lutheran churches. All Saints had merged with Steve's Peace Lutheran Church, and this building was available, so we leased this building, but we were not visible in the area as a Jewish organization, as a synagogue. But there was one business in the area. It was a Jewish bookstore called L'Chaim Bookstore, the only Jewish visible entity in the area. And 6 months after I began working, we woke up one day to discover that somebody had painted swastikas all over, spray painted swastikas all over the storefront, the door, and with other, kill the Jews. And at the time, again, I only had 2 or 3 Holocaust survivors in the community, but I had children of survivors, and it shook our community because there are many gated communities where we live, and people have moved out from other places to be safe. And this was a violation of a very high degree. And I remember as I was calling people and mobilizing support of therapists and other folks to help respond to this, and I had been interviewed by the police, I got a call from Steve saying, we have a meeting at your place at 11, come. Okay, and so I showed up, and there were, everybody showed up, and our little room was packed, and I was sitting there, and they were going, how are we going to respond? This is not just an attack on the Jewish community, this is an attack on all of us. What are we going to do? And they wrote this beautiful letter, and it was published in the newspaper, and 60, mostly churches, signed on, and I was just sitting there going, this is it. This is why I need, to be involved here. Not just for us, but the way, I saw this in my community. It was the single experience that provided comfort and hope. And it ultimately was, is a couple of kids, mischievous, drunk kids, but it didn't matter. It didn't change, the violation was huge.
I'm just curious, I always need to ask this question. How long have you guys been working together before this?
We weren't.
This
This was
is what
welcome.
brought you together.
This was welcome. Yeah, we had just, I had come in and Steve had, and we just started. We had crises right away. And I share this, this is not one of the case studies we're gonna look at, but it certainly was a crisis that was not only powerful for the Jewish community, but really was meaningful for the other communities. And I need to say, of the 60, and there were churches who signed who were really not in our immediate area, but heard about it, wanted to sign. And there was one church, the largest church, the Presbyterian church I mentioned, the 7,800 family church, that wouldn't sign. The only church that didn't sign. And that the assistant, one of the associate priests, who was an elder in their community, the priest, primary priest, was a younger, dashing, dynamic guy. The elder priest came to me in tears. He said, he said, I can't believe that our church wouldn't sign this letter. It breaks my heart. I will tell you, he said, the official line is that they didn't sign because in their policy is they don't sign any letters that they didn't pen themselves, that they didn't write themselves. And he said that this is wholly unacceptable to me, and I'm leaving to go to, he went to the Stans, he went to Kazakhstan or something. He said, I can no longer be with this church. But he said, before I go, I'm going to do something. And he arranged a gathering at Community Presbyterian Church, where we had in our area a well-known Presbyterian minister who had written a book about the righteous Gentiles. So they had a Holocaust Memorial Day at their church, co-sponsored with us. Our people had never been in their church. Their people had never sat with Jews before, and he did it around the main priest. He kind of did an end run, and but it was even with this church that wouldn't be in our group, because we have one rule in our group, one rule only, and that's no proselytizing. We have to respect each other. Can't do that. So they left. But it was a very, even in that demonstration of unwillingness to support and be part of the group, there were wonderful wonderful seeds were planted even in that ugly and hard experience. Anything else we need to, yeah,
Just two quick questions, a point of information.
sure.
What year was this incident took place? And how large of an Islamic community is or was there in your community?
So this happened in 1993.
Okay.
Our work began, so it's 24 years. And 3, 6, we'll do the math later. We'll have it
With
with
the
I
date.
think that's another workshop. Yeah. In any case,
Next year.
so the answer to the second question is, the Islamic group started, they actually started in there were about 40 families initially who got together. Today, there are over 300 families in the Islamic Center. And do you want to just say something about, you know, the zoning incident, just as a way of sort of giving, it's not one of our case studies, but,
Yes, so as that community evolved, they had been, within our county, none of the mosques have had public signage, ever. And so they actually, a little business park close to the police station in town, and decided to expand and just presented papers for that, which was fairly ordinary.
I think all they wanted to do was extend the hours of usage.
That's right,
I
no,
think
you're
that's
right,
what it
that's
was.
right,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
the hours. And
Their own
this
space.
was after 9/11, and there was community uproar, and the town council was besieged with letters, you know, demanding that all of them had to register with the FBI and submit to fingerprints, you know, and just, I mean, this is public in the newspapers, it's all around. So our response was to stand up as advocates and say, a number of us said, we're signing on as Muslims. And so you put our names in those documents because we want to be included. And then at public occasions with the town council and all, we as well advocated for their presence and how important that was, which eventually, I don't want to say it diffused it, but it was just, again, another example of when leadership enters the fray, and again, multi-faiths, it's very hard to argue with.
They had come, the matriarch of their community, Nasira,
Yes.
had come, but, you know, there was a reticence, especially, I mean, the community was felt so under siege after 9/11. They just wanted to keep the lowest profile possible. But when this happened, she came, we had a meeting at the Franciscan retreat center we have in the area. She came in tears that day, and we drafted a letter. I remember when we went to the zoning meeting, 7 of us from other faith traditions spoke on their behalf. There were about 50 Muslims present, and it was a sea of tears. And after that day, they were all in. They showed up, they invited us to their celebrations, they came to ours, everything shifted for that community. They felt these are people who are willing to stand with us, support us, write their names down as we are Muslims, and everything shifted with them. So that was their entry point, really. Don't you think?
It really was, and again, very briefly, what came of that eventually was Swivl services, which we created between Bethlehem and Peace Congregation, and a few other Christians as well, and then the Islamic community for a year and a half. We meet on a monthly basis, taking different themes to come and pray together. And
Does everybody know what Sulha
And
is?
you called it Sultan.
Pardon? Yeah, does anyone not know what Sulha? Okay, well, some people don't. So, Sulha is in the Muslim world, when there is a conflict between families, Sulha, they have professional mediators, and the Sulha is the mediation that happens. And in the Muslim world, when a sulha happens, they get the families together at one of the houses, and they break bread together. And the rule is they do not talk anything about the conflict. They simply sit and break bread. They bring their children and grandchildren. They recognize each other's humanity. And then they have a next session at the other house. And only in the third session do they begin speaking. And when they speak, one family gets to speak their truth, and the other family doesn't get to respond. I mean, it's a form of compassionate listening, if you're familiar with that Valley. And then they speak, the other family speaks. And so out of this, about 14 years ago, Gabi Meyer, and I don't remember the name of the Muslim that he was working with initially, started a sulha gathering in Israel. And it's in August every year, except the year of one of the years of the Lebanon wars. And started off the first time, I think there were about 270 people. And whole weekend, sort of Friday, they started with Muslim prayer, Shabbat morning, dancing, singing, breaking bread, lots of food. And then there's a truth tent, and things happen that are profound. The last gathering, I think, had 18,000 people. And there are, it's a movement in Israel, the Sulha movement. So representatives from, I don't know, most of you know, many of you know Eliyahu McLean, who was a Hebrew school teacher for me when he was a little pitzela. And I remember taking him aside going, "You can't teach the kids swear words in Hebrew. It's not going to work here for these parents." And Eliyahu and Sheikh Ibrahim came through, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, there's been a real, in our Sulha gatherings, we met in, first meeting was in Steve's church, then we had a meeting in Bet Chaim, and we had a meeting at the mosque, and it was a circle of truth-telling. We saw trigger films, compassionate listening films to start, and again, not being afraid to talk about the hardest things was a way of really building trust and building the base, the foundation for the deep work that we've been able to do over time. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we revisit a statement that you made a little bit earlier for clarification's sake.
Sure.
I would hate for anyone to leave this group thinking that the largest church in your vicinity that did not sign the document was a Presbyterian church. It's easy to confuse things, but my understanding is this was a breakaway church from the Presbyterian
Yes.
Church USA, which is generally in partnership with mainline Christianity and committed to peace and justice issues.
Absolutely.
The same thing could happen if this were a room of Christians, and Christians working together is deep ecumenism anyway.
Yes.
And we really wouldn't know from, Reform, Reconstructions, Lubavitcher, Renewal. It could easily be painted in a broad stroke as Jews.
Yeah.
So likewise, I think the Presbyterian Church USA is taking great.
Oh, I didn't mean, thank you.
No, just.
No, that's important, because actually the executive director of our Interfaith Council, we have a small interfaith group, we call it iServe, which is the interfaith of the San Ramon Valley. iServe is our group that we have there's about 15 communities, 14, 15 communities that are part of that. We're also part of a county, there's a I4C, Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, I4C, which has about 110 faith communities. And the executive director is a Presbyterian minister who is extraordinary, an extraordinary human being who has done it. so much work to bring us all together, you know, on so many levels. So I in no way wanted to indicate that this was a Presbyterian problem. I did say they left the Presbyterian, yeah, and they were, yeah, yes. And
So, you're in the Bay Area. It's a somewhat unique place that you get to live. We have a very strong interfaith council, some strong interfaith programming, and I'm very active in it. We're the only synagogue in town,
Where are you at?
Buzzbin, Montana.
it's one of the only synagogues in the state.
And I am the only congregational rabbi in the state at this point, not counting Chabad. But you know, for example, we have an interfaith panel where we come together, 4 clergy, and then always 2 invited guests, clergy, come and speak about some issue each month, and we typically have 100 or 150 people show up. I'd say that's very successful, especially in our community, but here's the issue. There are very few Jews who come. Very few.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, and this is really a question directed more at you, Dan, is I may have my heart totally committed to it, I do. I haven't been able to convince more than a handful of people in my whole community that this is important.
Right.
Yes.
And
So-
that's what I want to know. That's what I came here to learn.
So we're gonna look at these case studies, because I'd like to get to them, it's what we plan to do. And hopefully we plan to have time to talk about some of these issues, but I think in discussing this, you'll see how that issue is front and center. For every, it's not just for the Jews. Our Methodist, we have a core group from each community that gets it. And then, you know, the Methodist Church, very liberal church, very open, strong social justice church. And, you know, people there say, and I preached there, and we've done a lot of programs there, and people go, what does this have to do with Christianity? This is absolutely a distraction from why I'm a member of the church. So, you know, we're going to talk about it. We're going to address that issue. So I think there's another hand up.
I have it,
Yeah. Okay, let's dive in and see. Our hope is that these case studies will highlight that question and
Yes.
other questions, and we'll be able to talk about that.
That is the pivotal one for all of us.
So, case study 1.
Yeah.
Just a background, and then
Yes, you know, bro.
Yeah, there was an incident in which a gay teacher was outed on the internet in the very early, you know, internet was still a thing, and he was outed in a really ugly way, and there was a community scandal. It really, you know, given that we have such a strong evangelical presence and LDS Catholic, it was not. We're talking about now in mid-90s when we really started our work into the late 90s. It was not a gay-friendly place at all. It was great antipathy. But it is important to note that, well, why don't you take over here? Just some more background on this? Do you want to?
Yes, so, we've been a community meeting, the local school board had not responded in any public way, although it was certainly going to go with the momentum of the local direction at that point, and a second meeting was called upon, and this time all the gay lesbian supporters showed up, and we were asked to by the local gay community leaders to come and speak, and we did, and this meeting brought together about 400 to 500 folks in the local community.
And this was the first meeting, there had been about 500, the the Unified School District
Yes.
had implemented a policy of diversity. And the diversity included LGBT issues, just a mention of them. And there was a meeting, 500 people showed up, and they said, we're gonna reverse this policy. There was a commitment, they actually didn't, but there was a huge outpouring of anti-gay rhetoric and gay bashing at the first meeting. So fast forward to the second meeting.
Which was to conclude business and get it done with?
And the Gay Straight Alliance had asked to be on the agenda. The school board was 5 people, 3 of whom were in evangelical churches, very outspoken about their antipathy to LGBT issues, and they couldn't get on the agenda the whole year.
Right.
The whole year. Finally, the school board meeting in May, they were put on the agenda to make a presentation, and it was we were in multi-purpose room of a large middle school. Again, 500 people showed up. At this time, there had been in a number, just about 4 or 5 years, a shift, and there was a lot of folks who were in support of LGBT students showed up. And how is say a few word, if you would, about your community's response to your activity in this?
Well, I've worked these issues of struggle in our congregation back in 1990-91, and so we've become a gay-affirming congregation at that point. But we were the only church, and in terms of the Lutheran community to this day in our county, there's only one other one which has become gay-affirming. So, but fortunately, I've gotten the wisdom from mentors to say, until congregations own these dimensions of our life, it goes nowhere. What's the point of having leaders say great and creative things, because you're always going to get undercut? So that is what made the difference for me, is that my own congregation said, we are behind you with this.
And in my community, we had the UCC church, the local congregational church, had started something called an annual service called Witness Our Welcome for open and affirming houses of worship, the WOW service, Witness Our Welcome. And I couldn't get very many people from my community to go to the service. It's one of my favorite services of the year. I mean, the love and it's like coming to Ohala, the service. It's like juicy and alive and wonderful. But my community is fairly liberal socially, but there was a core of homophobic folks who were very outspoken. And when I went to my board and said, there's this meeting coming up on the school board in support of our kids, our children, feeling safe at school, as gay and lesbian students, before transgender was even sort of an issue that many of us were conscious of. And the board voted not to have, I could go on my own as a rabbi. They did not give me permission to represent my synagogue. And it was the only time in the 20-some odd years I've been at the community that I considered leaving this congregation. I mean, it was a crisis for me personally. I was furious. I was, and there were about 12 of us, the clergy went. I was the only, everyone went and spoke on behalf of their community. And I had to say that I was speaking as an individual, and it nearly choked me, and I was humiliated for the Jewish community. But that was just a little coda that in the year following, my entire emphasis was on this issue, and a year and a half later, the core group of homophobic folks decided to leave. And I think it was wonderful. I helped them find another community, but I said, this is probably not the best community for you. And things have then shifted tremendously in my community around that. So just, there's sometimes, or Zalm used to teach, that there's sometimes you work with people and work with people and work with people, but when people threaten the integrity of the community as it is forming and reforming, sometimes you have to invite people off the bus. And these families left of their own accord, but they were, because of my activism, they were invited off the bus. So, back to the meeting.
So it comes to this crucial meeting where the decision is to be made. The meeting began at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah,
And I recall that Dan and I finally spoke about 11:30 that night. And the meeting went on until, wasn't it, 2? At least
1:30,
1:30.
2 o'clock. I brought my children.
Mhm.
My boys were 14 and 10 or 11, and my wife came, and we were sitting there, and one of the students, they gave from the GSA, these young folks got up and told their stories, heartbreaking stories. One young man said that he was so harassed and physically assaulted, couldn't find any help at the school, and was ready to commit suicide. And he found this counselor at the school that saved his life. He told his story, and he was crying. And I was, sitting there with my boys, and these two Danville matrons, very properly made up, one in sotto voce, they turned towards each other in a voice that was, they said, too bad they found that counselor. And my sons were like, and I reached over and I put my arms around these women, and a voice as loud as theirs, I said, you should be so ashamed of yourselves. So there was a huge preponderance of folks speaking in support of these young people. We should say, and clarify maybe, that the central issue they brought to the school board was that they wanted there to be created a sanctuary committee for LGBT students. A sanctuary, a place where they could go, because their own administrations, every time they went, it got worse, and there was nobody to receive them, nobody to witness them, nobody to support them. So they wanted the Unified School District to set up a sanctuary committee. So,
Yes.
my kids left at about 9:30 or 10, and the room started, but we were there all night long. And, it came down to a vote. And the vote was 3-2 again. There were, some of the things were, well, if we establish a sanctuary committee for the gay and lesbian students, we have to establish a sanctuary committee for the fat students and the skinny students. And it was like, really? I mean, if you've been involved in this issue at all, you know how
Oh, yes.
absurd, how appalling.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, so at 1:30 in the morning, 1:45 in the morning, they voted 3-2 not to establish a sanctuary committee. And these kids, you could see, it was like, really? No one will stand for us? No one will support us? You heard all these stories?
15 kids, one father weeping, saying, I sleep with a phone under my pillow every night because my son has attempted suicide 3 times. And that is put up before this whole public gathering. 3-2, we don't need this.
So this comes to our point of decision. We gathered, we came as faith community leaders. A majority of our interfaith group showed up, spoke on behalf of these students. The school board spoke, gave their decision, and we went home that night bereft. We counseled some of the young people and looked at each other and said, what do we do now? And so we would like, let's see, we have 3, 6, 9. Threes?
Good.
Okay, 3 it is.
Can you clarify something for me?
Yes.
I don't know how important it is, but just in my brain.
Sure.
Was this the meeting where you were not allowed
Yes.
to?
Yes.
And so you weren't represented as an interfaith clergy group?
I was speaking as a rabbi.
it was part of the group that you were for working together.
Yeah, I
Yes.
spoke on
Together
behalf
as a
of the
group.
interfaith group, not on behalf of my community.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My other question is,
Yes.
so many faith traditions have issues with homosexuality, so how did you agree as an interfaith group that you were gonna tackle that?
Thank you. That's our question to you right now, groups of 3.
Yes.
How are you gonna solve this?
We're gonna give you,
No,
Right on.
No, you mean to even the showing up at the board
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah,
well, the
How'd you
The
agree
Catholic,
to do that?
look,
like Catholics,
the Mormons,
Protestants, Mormons.
I didn't say everybody showed up. I said a majority
No,
of the
but how
folks.
did your interfaith, do you have a process to vote that you're gonna take on an issue? Or it's just a loose group of interfaith people?
No, we showed up as everyone but me showed up representing the faith communities that they felt they could, that they had
Do you
permission.
have an executive director who sends out an email and says, I'm gonna show up, or just phone calls, organic?
So you came as representatives of your individual groups?
Yes.
Not as the coalition?
No, we did not show up as the coalition because we didn't meet and vote on this. Because again, there were people who felt very strongly, in fact, there were folks who showed up in against the proposition, who were, there was a Catholic priest who spoke, who thought it was a bad idea to create a sanctuary committee. And there were other, the evangelical churches had.
So I guess I'm talking
So
about
we-
process.
Yeah,
We function as an egalitarian community,
Yeah.
I'll say it, share it that way. We don't have a formal structure in terms of executive director. We do for the county level, but not our immediate valley zone. So in this regard, Mormon, Catholic, and Baha'i groups did not participate with us, in our presentation.
Baha'i should participate.
Not in this issue.
No, not on this
I
issue.
love everybody.
Yeah.
Could you just say a little bit more about the Gay Straight Alliance and who they were and what they provide?
They'd come together fairly recently within our community at that time, and they were trying to be a support network for the students in particular and focused on this sanctuary. We need protection, somebody we can trust in school.
So they were gay straight alliances we had at the time 3 large high schools in the area, and one of them had just recently established a gay straight alliance, and one was discussing it and the other was not.
And were these student groups?
Yes, it's a
Yes,
student
yes,
group,
student-led.
student-led organization, yes.
So back on his question, how did everybody get the idea to come to that meeting? How did the word get out?
This was a very contentious local social
Was
issue.
it in the
Yeah.
newspaper?
Oh, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. There was.
So they said, all come to this meeting?
Well, there was, it was in the newspapers and people were talking about it. It was a polarizing issue. As I said, 4 years before, it had been almost all, this diversity policy is wrong. The evangelicals had really held the day. And there had been many more liberal churches had come into being in a very short period of time, and things started to shift. Mostly, I guess I should say that in our area at the time, they had built, there was a corridor, and they had built 11,000 new homes. And that was another zoning issue and an affordable housing issue which we were involved in. But the point is that there was an influx of, before that, the building of that, our area was mayonnaise on white bread. It was lily white community. And when they built those 11,000 homes, there was a huge influx of people from India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, people of color. And it's like in one fell swoop, the community was like integrated. It's funny about integration in the year 2000, but that, so things started to shift. There were social shifts, so in a very short period of time. So everyone in the community knew about this meeting. And we were certainly, there were people in all of our communities who were saying, are you going to go? Should we go? And people spoke to us for and against on this issue.
And the GSA, again, specifically asked us as religious leaders to come speak.
Yeah, we were invited, yes.
So,
So in posing the question to us,
yes.
are you asking us to think about it in terms of when you had to deal with it, or in terms of the the atmospherics in our communities now?
No, we're asking to you to enter into this,
Yeah.
this moment with us. Be in that place. We've just gotten the ruling has been made, the decision was made, and where do we go from here? Because we had a meeting the very next day of the interfaith group.
And the
And-
interfaith group consisted of how many?
14, 15 communities, faith communities.
And did that include people who had chosen not to go?
Yes.
Or who had gone in opposition?
Yes,
And there was also Muslim,
Yes.
Muslim group? and-
yes. Everyone showed up, and the question was, what do we do? And it was a really important moment for for our community, our larger community. And we felt we were faced with a question, no one else was gonna do anything, that was quite clear. And our question was, is there anything, what should we do? That was our moment of decision. So we invite you to we're gonna give you 10 minutes, not a lot of time, just to talk through what